Back live here on The Beat. I'm Curtis Wright. 7:49 in the morning, the Economic Times. And joining us today is former Congressman Joe DioGuardi. You know, folks, I mentioned to you last week that one of the famous quotes of Churchill was, "It is no use saying we are doing our best. You have to succeed in doing what is necessary." But, you know, that statement, you need to understand, comes from someone who has made a decision that their country is more important than anything else. And so they're rededicating themselves to not do their best, but do what is necessary. That means anything that is necessary to save their country. Now, in this case, I believe you're right. I think when we talk about the culture in Washington, Joe, I think, first of all, we need a majority of people that are there for the right reasons and dedicated to the United States of America. Then secondly, if you're there for that reason, then it's, and you certainly show this in the piece that you wrote, The Global Debt Bomb and the Fiscal Unsustainability of the United States and Europe, that we have to know, and people do this in the private sector. I've been involved in doing this with companies in the private sector. We've got to know where we stand. And the only way to do that is to have GAAP put in place, those generally accepted accounting principles, to have the consolidated statements, to know exactly where we stand. And then step 3 is to say, okay, folks, we rededicated ourselves to putting the country first. We're going to have to start making the tough decisions to turn this boat around. I mean, that's a process that has taken place over hundreds of years, thousands and thousands of times. But for some reason, we can't do that in Washington. Why?
Well, you know, it's a problem that has evolved because of the poison that money has put in the system. We have developed a representative group of people in the House and in the Senate that depend far too much on money for re-election. And that allows special interests to have a placemat in the system. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's not like, I'll give you that contribution, you give me this vote. That's not the way it is. That would be, bribery. But over a period of time, there's a comfort level in Washington, whether it's over dinner, whether it's at these retreats that they go to with the think tanks, and every now and then Congress and the Senate joins them. Each party does it separately. There's a comfort level in talking with these people, and then they feel that this is the way the system works. And over 20, 30 years, we've now gotten to the point where we really don't have the representative government we need. And what kind of helped along the way to get to this bad situation is redistricting. Because every 10 years, because we've left it to the political elite in each state to determine, up until now at least, now we're getting some independent redistricting commissions, we let it to them to determine, which people we want back that will support our positions, and therefore take New York State. When I was a congressman, we had 34 members of Congress, in the House, that is, all right? And now we're down to, I believe it's 20, we just lost 2 more. I think it's now 27. When it was 34, there were 17 Republicans and 17 Democrats. That's just about the time that redistricting started to change so that the legislature took complete control. Now, as you know, we are kind of a welfare state like California, and therefore the Democrats will have no trouble in voting for Mr. Obama instead of Mr. Romney. Well, over a period of time, guess what? We ended up with as little as, I think the last count in the last election was that we had 5 Republicans, and that's when we had 29 and 24 Democrats. Now, look at that imbalance. That means New York State is practically nowhere when it comes to a bipartisan view of what that delegation should do. So we then encourage even more taxing, borrowing, and spending, because the people who come here, like in California, they don't come here necessarily for jobs. They come here for, a safety net. Mm-hmm. And that safety net used to be called welfare. Now it's called a safety net. And I agree that the people who can't help themselves, the disabled, the people who are so down, and out, They need to be helped. We don't want to see them on the street homeless. That creates more crime. But have we done a good job in determining who should get public support and who shouldn't? I think in New York State, we're just waking up to that. And I shouldn't say just this year, but over the last 10 years or so, more people are worried about it because we've run out of money.
Well,
we're number 49 on the list in terms of the bond ratings in America. That means the price of doing business here, when you are a borrowing state like we are, goes up. And that's basically what's happening to the U.S. government. Because if we lose another notch on that debt rating, which we're likely to do, because I keep hearing Fitch and Moody's and Standard & Poor's saying, hey, Washington, if you don't come up with a plan and get your fiscal house together so we don't go off a fiscal cliff, we're not waiting for that cliff to happen for you to go off the cliff. We're going to drop your bond rating now to send you a strong signal, then the cost of business goes up. So money is the problem. This is a big issue, Curtis, and we need to get a much broader debate on where we've gone in 236 years.
This is what concerns me, Joe. And I think it's an important discussion, especially for Republicans to have. The biggest thing that I saw in the last election that was such a danger to America was this large group of people that voted in a president, and they had such a deep and wide false expectations. I knew that was going to come back and bite America and bite us hard. But let's not have the same thing with Mr. Romney. Look, the bottom line is that we know that politics and money is the number one priority, the number one motivator. Okay, so we accept that. That culture in Washington is the problem. Okay, Mr. Romney, is he going to Washington? My first question is he going to Washington? Is he an acceptable candidate because he will protect a certain amount of the status quo? If he's not going to Washington to protect the status quo, but going maybe, as Churchill said, to do what is necessary, then the first thing he's going to do, if you look at his background and his resume, is say, you know what, Joe, you're absolutely right. The first thing I'm going to do is we're going to change this doggone thing, and I want to know where we stand. I want all the numbers. I want them on the same page, and we're going to change the way this is done. We're going to do it like some of the states do. We're going to lay up these consolidated statements under the GAAP, and we're going to be honest with the American people and the legislators. We're going to put it out there in public so everybody knows it, and now we're going to move forward.